Howdy everyone, it's me, the Drizzleboy. Today we're going to be talking about my personal tier list for the Pokemon Nintendo Switch titles. Pokemon Day is on the horizon. We don't know what's going to be announced, but I kind of want to give some insight on what Pokemon games I want to see. Let's start from the bottom up. So Pokemon BDSP. The reason I cannot stand this game, the reason why I put it all the way at the bottom is because the game to me is like nearly unplayable or enjoyable. Like the friendship mechanic completely ruins any sort of experience you're trying to get within battle because it's like even when I bring the weakest Pokemon known to man, it's like they be living attacks, dodging burns, waking up from sleep randomly, just like healing itself out of nowhere. And I'm like, I just want to play the game. Like I want to be able to lose. And I think that's something about as a gamer, I think that it's like not everything needs to be handed to you. You know, like I know these games are kind of more designed towards children and that's why. So, these games don't really gravitate to me. I love the art style. I think it's actually like one of the better art styles. I think that the chibi direction was kind of the direction I do want to see them get back into. I know these games sold pretty well, so we might see it again in the future. I just think the game design and the game balancing is just like a bit of a mess. But overall, like it's like you're going through Sinnoh again, but I'd rather play the original kind of Sinnoh games if you want that kind of experience. This was like a little nostalgia trip, like to me at least. Part of Pokemon's strategy, at least for the Nintendo Switch era, is to really try to hit all these different quadrants when it comes to, who it's trying to appeal to. That not every game is meant for a hardcore Pokemon fan. And so to me at least, it's like you kind of get that kind of vibe where it's like, okay, this wasn't necessarily meant for somebody like me who's been playing Pokemon a very long time. And I think that this is the kind of game again you would give like to a young kid, like a niece or a nephew for their birthday kind of thing, that this might not be like gravitate towards you if you are a long-term Pokemon fan. The next game I'm going to be talking about is Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Yeah, this one. This the one, this the Pokemon game, right? And I think that, I reflect back on my experience playing it, that I did one playthrough and then kind of just dropped the game. I tried to play it again, but it's just like I really couldn't get over the visuals. I have a condition called functional neurological disorder. So, choppy frame rate does just like really get under my skin and actually starts, kind of getting those epilepsy motor tic kind of symptoms where it's like, some games do kind of trigger me. And this game had a very, very inconsistent, frame rate when the game first came out. I don't know if they patched that, but for me, it was kind of like, I don't really enjoy the experience from the visual sense that it's like, even though the game is, I think is like not that bad game design wise, like, it definitely can be improved upon. I think that there should have been level scaling for the gym leaders. But like overall, I like that I could play with my husband. That was a really fun part of the experience is that we could load into the world together. I want to see more of that in the future. So I do want to emphasize that that was my favorite mechanic in that game. But it still just felt like a little bit like lazy. Like there's a lot of like I think technical restrictions with the art. Like I think that the game engine that they was using wasn't really optimized for an open world experience, and I think that's part of the problem. That if this game was an Unreal Engine or Unity or something along those lines, we might be able to see more consistent frame rates, but we don't really know. So honestly, at the end of the day, this is in C tier because I really just like did not enjoy my overall experience with this game. That they just like really felt like they cheaped out in a lot of different ways. I think that Nimona as a rival is a really great character. The other characters I didn't really care for, but Nimona, like she was a really cool rival. I like Nimona. Nimona is pretty sick. So yeah, that's really all about this game. I can, hardly remember a lot of it. I think that, the Pokemon, the new Pokemon were cool. If I can't remember the gym leaders, it usually means that they were like not very well integrated into the game. I think I remember the one with the Teddy Ursa because it was like the first. I think that's the first one. It's like, oh my god, Teddy Ursa's using Fury Cutter or something like Bug type. There was the water type one because I remember thinking that his city was so ugly. Like, oh my god, I forgot. Oh my god, what's that bitch's name? Iono. Oh my god, yeah, Iono. Her city is atrocious, but you know what? you know what? I kind of like her design. Like she kind of eats that ZA character the fuck up. I'm sorry, y'all can bitch with me all you want. She eats. Okay, so that's really all I know about the gym leaders. So we might as well, I don't think they had an Elite Four. I don't recall. So let's move on to the next one. There are two games in B tier, and there's no order to this. I actually think they both kind of sit in the same place for me. But we're gonna start with Pokemon Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu. I think that this game gets a lot of slack, but I think the stylized kind of environments and character design is really the direction I felt like Pokemon should have kept going in. I really feel like they nailed the design of this game, and not to mention, I feel like the art style is of a much smaller scope than what they're trying to do with things like Legends ZA, in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, where I think they had trouble executing at that kind of, that kind of prowess that they wanted to do a very large open scale game. But I think the stylized kind of like, based around the proportions of the retro kind of games, I feel like it worked a lot better. The game still existed on like what I'd say is a grid for all the pieces of the game, while Legends ZA and Scarlet and Violet are all more like self-explorative open world. And as for the gameplay, the game is very easy. Like I think that this is another one that sits kind of in that same genre that BDSP does, where it's supposed to be meant for like a parent to play with their kid, or kids to play, and it's like adults can still get the same experience out of it. But I think that when Pokemon is trying to, direct towards a younger audience, they're going to make the games easier. And we saw in more like, I think, Legends Arceus with that really challenging boss battle at the end. I think that the online competitive side of the Scarlet and Violet and Sword of Shield era, those games were designed to be more for kind of all people. While I feel like again, this game is meant for a younger or a casual audience. I do think that's another thing we don't talk about, is that I felt like casual fans probably fucking love this game, because it's like they're going through Kanto, seeing all the original Pokemon. You can ride on them. The riding mechanic was really, really fun, and it was integrated into so many different Pokemon that it felt like the world was really alive. I think that that's something I would really love to see again. I don't think this game is too daunting either, that it's like, I feel like completionist runs, shiny hunting, and trying to complete the Pokedex is super achievable in this game, and it connected to Pokemon Go, so it is very easy to fill out Pokemon that you was missing. So in the end, I really felt like, I think that I see why this game, gravitated towards me, even though it's not necessarily a traditional Pokemon game. I really had fun, and also like could really play it with other people in a way that you can't play other Pokemon games. The next Pokemon game I'm talking about is Pokemon Legends ZA. I really love the combat system of this game. When it first came out, I was using my really shitty playthrough Pokemon and going on ladder and just playing non-stop while taking shots of vodka. That shit was so fun. Like, I was living it up. And I think that, because of things like the DLC coming right out, which I didn't really get, and I didn't really feel like completing the game because I saw my husband, play the ending, and I thought it was really just like really a slog. That it's like, after I watched him play it, it's like I'm not sitting through that again. And I think that was also, partly my fault. But that it, like, had I actually beaten the game and had I got the DLC, I would probably still be taking shots of vodka and playing that ranked mode, because it was that fun. I think my issues with the ranked mode itself as well, is that the targeting is a little bit different from the actual in-game like gameplay. Like, it seems like the balancing's a little bit different. The moves like react a lot slower, and I don't know if it's like a latency thing or what, but it really kind of shows that a lot of moves are kind of like really gutted because the time it takes to launch is just so damn slow, especially for melee moves. So you really have to have a good reason to use just a random melee Pokemon outside of ones that know like Earthquake, because Earthquake is like the most broken move in that game. So really there's a lot of different problems with that in itself, that I feel like had they spent more time on the balancing of it, it does feel a little bit rushed. So had they spent more time on the balancing of the competitive side when it came to each individual moves, like letting Mawile actually hit with Iron Head, that would be cool. So I think that that's one of the big problems with that. On the other hand, you have the story gameplay, where it's like, I actually do like all the characters in their own way. I think that that one electric gym leader, I forgot her name, her arc was so awful that it ruined that one character that you're with throughout the playthrough. I'm sorry, y'all. I had brain damage. I don't remember names. But so this is like one thing. So it's like I liked the girl with the star you. Like she was really cool. She was funny. She's probably my favorite character. And me and my husband be beefing over the rival, the main rival. Can't remember her name either. But you know, I loved her character because I just thought it was so funny how comically awful and evil this bitch is, but she's supposed to be acting like your best friend. And I think that that kind of like dynamic, like you don't really like, you know, think about in a Pokemon game. But I think that the writing had a lot more humor, and I felt like the jokes landed a little bit better than I've ever seen in a recent Pokemon game. So I hope that, you know, when they get voice acting, we'll really actually see how that plays out, because I think the lack of voice acting really was like a you know, a downgrade of this game, because I think it's like it gets to the point where it's like, what's the point of making their mouths kind of like flap like that if you know you're not going to add voice acting? I think like I never would question why Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu don't have voice acting. Like I never would think about that because of the style. So I definitely think Pokemon should think about that, that if you're not going to include voice acting, you know, maybe do something a little bit more stylized with their work. Other than that, you know, I think like the wild zones are like kind of cool to explore. The way that they're kind of like divvying out the Pokemon throughout the story, catching them, you know, and battling them helps you progress in the game. I think that that kind of like gameplay loop worked really well. I think it was better than how Legends Arceus had their gameplay, because I think my issue with Legend Arceus is that, you know, those story missions is like you had to grind so much before you can move on to the next area, even though I'm like, all right, y'all, I'm done, like I kind of just want to move on now. You kind of was a little bit stuck behind. So I think that this game kind of like improved that experience. But I think that the small corridors in which these Pokemon existed in, you know, some of them were well designed and some of them were very, very lazy. You know, it felt like it was just like, okay, a small block of land where it's just like they just copy paste a bunch of Pokemon everywhere, you know, versus ones where it felt like they did have a sense of nature built into it. I think the this is something I noticed is some of the early ones I felt like were like clearly better designed, and as you got further through the game, it's like it's just like a random like square would pop up and it's like, oh, it has all the niche Pokemon that you want, you know. So in the end, you know, it's not that bad. I do like this game a lot. I had a lot of fun playing it. The combat system's cool, and you know it might have that slight edge over Let's Go. But I will say this: I did complete Let's Go Eevee, and I did like kind of do some like side quest stuff at the end. You know, shiny hunting and things. So it's like I kind of put them in the same boat when I look at how I personally enjoyed these games. Next up is Pokemon Sword and Shield. Oh my god. This was such a controversy. The whole Dexit thing, the art style, the trees, you know, it was all a mess. And it turns out that this was one of the best games on Nintendo Switch, like the best Pokemon game. And it's so funny to me now because even when I played it originally, I was like, okay, y'all just bitching for no reason. Like it's kind of fun. Like I actually liked the Dynamax raids. You know, a little bit, like not a lot. Like I didn't like doing it that much, but I mean, it's like it was a cool idea behind it. You know, the competitive scene was really, really fun. I felt like there was like a renaissance during that era where it's like we saw a lot of like cool different things that you would never expect. Like I think Blast Burn Charizard, it's like that was like the meta pick, and it's like you would like in my head, I'm like, that's crazy. You know, so because of the mechanics of Dynamax, like all these really niche Pokemon kind of popped up, and you know there was a lot of meta power creep in these in certain seasons of that, because I think that, you know, once you start like putting in really broken legendaries, it just really breaks these mechanics like Terra, like Dynamax, and it's honestly why I tend to prefer the early seasons within VGC, is because, you know, they tend to not use or allow the legendary Pokemon. They haven't released like DLC or anything like that. So in the end, you get a much smaller group of Pokemon you get to work with, but also, you know, it really bars out, you know, the really broken Pokemon and allows more, you know, niche Pokemon to flourish. Outside that, my biggest criticism is that the story is really god awful. You know, it's really short as well. I think the overall gameplay experience is pretty short, But I will say the DLC, I think this game's DLC is probably the best DLC. And I think it's the only one I bought. So you know what? I might be a little bit biased, but I actually really like the exploration of the DLC. It really felt like, the wild area taken to the full potential. I think it was supposed to be. The DLC is quite beautiful to explore. Like I think it's the most beautiful like scenes and environment work that Pokemon has done, which is just kind of crazy to me. That it's like they really kind of like went downhill. Like, and it's like you look at if you go through the gameplay of the DLCs, it's like wow, they put in a lot of work into this and made it really beautiful. And I think that's part of the problem is they just keep jumping art styles instead of trying to really perfect one. And they kind of tried to perfect the Scarlet and Violet one in Legends ZA. It's like it's better, but it's not. It's like I really don't even prefer that art style. I really prefer the stylized ones. I think they work out a lot better. I think Sword and Shield really got that right. All the gym leaders are really memorable to me, so that was a really great sign that, I really think that they did a good job with, even with a short amount of dialogue a lot of these characters had, they had their own moments. So I think that was a really great way to integrate the gym leaders. And I hope that we get another set of gym leaders that kind of match this kind of aura, because I don't think that Scarlet and Violet has been able to follow that up. Not much to say other than that. I think it's a pretty solid Pokemon game and definitely one of the better ones on the Nintendo Switch. And that's why I put it in A tier. Lastly is S tier. And I know I'm going to shock some of y'all, but I put Fire Red and Leaf Green in S tier. And you know why? Because Fire Red and Leaf Green are one of the best games on the Pokemon Nintendo Switch. Let's go, guys. One of the cheapest and most fun Pokemon games on the Nintendo Switch? Say no more. I will be buying this. The problem with a lot of the Nintendo Switch era games is they lack focus. Pokemon really tried to put its eggs in all these different baskets, and really only a few of them panned out. I think that really, to me, Legends Arceus and Sword and Shield are the two really Pokemon games that I would claim as fun and that I would want to play. But other than that, it's like, dang, they really missed so many opportunities with these individual titles. Like, if you put these titles on a list, you would probably be like, oh my god, this is so cool. And then you actually play them and it's like, wow, none of these really add an experience to me that's worth playing. I play games other than Pokemon, but when I play Pokemon, I want to play, the best versions of Pokemon that I love. There's so many different Pokemon games that Pokemon competes with itself in the user base's playtime. So if you really think about that, it's like I'm going to be playing Fire Red and Leaf Green a lot. I'm going to be completing that game. I'm going to be speed running it. I'm going to be doing multiple playthroughs, because it's like you can really get a lot out of that game, because the old design of that game was more to the experience of a JRPG that I personally grew up with and appreciate. So, I know that some people are going to be, all controversial about the inclusion of this game, but I do think that Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green are S tier games on the Pokemon Nintendo Switch. Legends Arceus is a really, really fun game, held back by a few fatal flaws. I think that this is, to me, the most fun Pokemon game, especially for me as a longtime veteran. It really felt like they added onto the lore of Sinnoh. They really added on top of that, characterized a lot of familiar faces in a way that wasn't just, inserting them in. It really actually felt like a way that they brought lore to the characters that are later represented in the series. I thought it was a genius way to introduce this series, and now I'm like looking back at this game versus Legends ZA, and I'm like, man, I really wish they kept the motif of the past, because it really just kind of feels like it's like they a little bit kind of like broken up the franchise just a little bit. Like, I think that this really should have been the series where it's like really exploring nature in the way that it's like, a small civilization before, technology came along. It was such a great idea. The mechanics of the catching, the throwing was really, really fun. You would use items where it's like you can smoke screen yourself. You can throw mud balls at the Pokemon to kind of like get them to break their focus. You can use berries to lure them. Some Pokemon are skittish, so they'd run away if you try to like, just run at them or alert them. Certain Pokemons would just attack right at you. They would be aggro. You can initiate battles with multiple Pokemon, not just one at a time. You would be battling like 5 different Pokemon at once, and it'd be like the Pokemon Gauntlet, like the hard mode. You could honestly just grab a team of just any random Pokemon in your PC and just try to hard mode the environment and see what you can get away with, trying to attack the most dangerous thing out there. And that's what really made it fun to me, is that the level scaling really kind of like, was well done in that sense with the environment, that you could go really deep into the wilderness and find higher level Pokemon, or you could, like fight the alpha Pokemon who, created such a challenge. So there's a lot of different ways to play the game. There was a lot of cool resource crafting stuff that I liked that I don't think we've really seen in Pokemon again, where it's like, I do actually like that crafting system. I think it's one of the more fun parts of that game, made it feel like, very, very interactive, and, really ties to the whole kind of like hunting kind of motif, leaving the village to, find a greater power kind of thing. So it all really tied together. I think there's definitely like issues with this pacing of the story. I think my biggest issue with the game is the environments, like the loaded environments. A lot of them are, well designed, and then as you progress through the game, they just get lazier and lazier. I think the last location is the ice area, and it's like literally the worst designed one. It's just like a blanket sheet of ice with random Pokemon, put everywhere. While in other locations, it's like they had kind of like key monuments that kind of represented the different areas. I know that the ice location had like that snow point kind of like colossal thing. I forgot what, Coliseum or something, and it's like the relics, and it's like, okay, this is really cool, but you don't really have much of a reason to go back there, other than I think you can get Regigigas there. But in the end, there's not much to explore there, and I never really spent my time in the ice biome because it really just felt like a waste of time outside of just getting, the essential Pokédex entries. I really preferred exploring the other areas. Like, you could go back and use like really weak Pokemon and kind of just like create your own adventure. It really felt like something where it's like you got to build your own narrative. It's like, okay, I'm gonna shiny hunt Eevee, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm gonna bring my little cute baby squad to fight these Eevees. It's like, there's a lot of different ways you can play. The shiny hunting is probably the most fun out of any Pokemon game, where it's like they would be like hordes that would appear on the map, and that horde had like a much higher chance to drop shinies, and they would just keep spawning that Pokemon over and over again until you defeat them all, and the horde would disappear. There was just a high shiny chance rate, and also on top of that, because you're exploring the nature so much, that the shinies would just pop out of nowhere. My issue with like Scarlet, Violet, Legend ZA is that their shiny system is revolving around like abusing the camera, like literally, or like review, like abusing like issues in the code, where it's like you could walk a little bit too far and they would despawn, and then you walk back and forth, and it's just like, this is just stupid. Like, I never would shiny hunt in a game where it's not fun, because like even BDSP, it's like you had to use some sort of like pokey chain radar type shit. I'm like, I'm not doing this shit. I tried for like 5 minutes, and I'm like, I can't. So, in the end, it's like I actually had a good experience shiny hunting. It's a mechanic that a lot of people really love. So I do hope they bring that kind of back. I think that, Legends Arceus should be the formula for new Pokemon games, because I think that like diehard fans love that game. And there was definitely things that went wrong with it, but at the end of the day, that's the game I'm gonna go back to and replay. I've completed that game, so I think near completion. I don't know what else is left in the game. I wish they had DLC. That's the one game I wish they had DLC for, because it felt like it leaned up into that, because there was so much of nothing in the post game that it's like, okay, like I'm sure that any second now they're gonna announce that DLC, and it never came. Very disappointed, very disappointed. All the fans are crying right now, every single one. So, in the end, I really love this game. It has a special place in my heart because it felt like the first time in a very long time where I played a Pokemon game and I'm like, this is cool. This is really cool. And it's like, I'm playing this because I'm having fun, not because I love Pokemon and I want to see what disaster comes out next. So I do hope that, the announcements that come out on Pokemon Day kind of mirror the stuff that I want to see out of the franchise. I know I've talked a lot about the game so far. I hope y'all appreciated the video. This is my personal opinion. Y'all can hate all you want. Y'all can disagree. Argue in the comment section. Boost my algorithm. Give me that money. Thank you for watching the Drizzleboy Show, and y'all have a great day.